All right, everyone, let's get started. Thanks so much for coming. Jamie, if you wouldn't mind letting the people in who are showing up, thank you. Yeah, so welcome to the fall CCHAB meeting today. We'll go until about noon. And so just starting off with your co-chair introductions, as always. I'm Karen Odkins, one of the co-chairs at CDFW, and here today with me, we have
I'm Jamie Smith. I am one of the other co-chairs of the CCHAB network from Squirt. And
and
don't know
I,
if
I
Sarah,
don't see Sarah.
yeah.
I think she had a conflicting meeting, so she might be in and out today. But she is our other co-chair. So if you guys wouldn't mind dropping your name and where you're coming from in the chat, your organization, that would be awesome, so we can keep track of attendance. And we will jump right into our first presentation for the morning. We have Justin Greenman, who is here with NOAA, and he's going to be talking about our stranding network. So passing it right over to you, Justin. Um, Let me stop sharing, and then you can share. That works for you.
Fantastic. All right.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Justin Greenman here. All right, let me see if I can get the right window open.
I see it looks good.
Great. Okay. And I'm actually going to hop off camera because I'm at home and I just want to make sure I save bandwidth for the presentation. There we go. But there's a picture of me right there so you can see who I am. And let me check out the right screen on. Okay. Let me know if anything changes and you can't see. I don't use Zoom very often with NOAA. So if everything goes away, just let me know. Okay, so I'm here today to present a little bit on the West Coast Region Marine Mammal and Sea Turtle Stranding Network and what we do, which is essentially response, rescue, rehab, and research. There's a photo of me with one of our awesome animals. Actually, this is out on the Channel Islands, and this is, interestingly enough, a hybrid sea lion and a fur seal. So kind of crazy things going on out there. What I'll be talking about today, or what I was asked to present on today, was how the stranding network is organized, how stranding response works, how stranding data is collected and used, and then how HAB events are handled by the stranding network. You'll notice there's no bullet on there that includes results or big findings from the events. That stuff we're still working on, and I'm not in a position to present that. But I will talk about how the network is run, which is part of my job. But before we get into how the network is run, I should probably start at the beginning with what is a stranding. That's a term I'll be using quite a bit today. A stranding is a live marine mammal or sea turtle that's incapable of returning to the water or incapable of returning to its natural habitat. So this could be an animal upriver or an animal that got entrained in a power plant, a pool or something like that. Or it's in need of medical attention, it's injured or it's sick. And then, of course, any dead marine mammal or sea turtle in the water or on shore is considered a stranding. And on the West Coast region, for the states of California, Oregon, and Washington, we have the Marine Mammal and Sea Turtle Stranding Network. It's primarily a marine mammal stranding network, but we do respond to sea turtles, so that's why they're included in there as well, but they don't make up a large portion of our responses. We have 30 plus network organizations throughout the 3 states. Some focus specifically on dead response, some focus on live response. In many cases, those live response facilities are mostly focused on pinniped rehab. One of the things that they do keep an eye on there at those hospitals is disease detection and treatment, species-wide health monitoring. We know these are sentinel species. And then another thing we look at is human interactions. Membership in the network includes many different organizations, including nonprofits, universities, museums, aquariums, commercial, state, and federal partners. And we can see some of them right here. So this is a map of California's Stranding Network members. The folks that are bolded and underlined there, those are organizations that do live rescue. So those are the ones that are especially hit tough by these DA events. At the bottom there are 2 that have asterisks, the Aquarium of the Pacific and Monterey Bay Aquarium. They help us out with sea turtle rehab. And I'd be amiss if I didn't mention our partners, the US Navy, and then of course the other federal, state, and local authorities, state parks and things like that, who also provide data to the network. But those groups that are highlighted and underlined are our rehab centers. focusing primarily on pinnipeds. And of course, we're a whole West Coast region, so we also have partners in Washington and Oregon. You'll note that the green ones are Washington, the orange ones are Oregon. You'll notice that there are quite a few less rehab centers in Washington, and there are no rehab centers in Oregon. There's actually a state law that prohibits the rehab of non-endangered marine mammals in that state. And so there's no rehab there, but they do partner with their partner organizations north and south to do that kind of work. So I'll get into a little bit of what the network does. One of the main things that we deal with is dead strandings. And of course, the very low level response to that would be documentation. In some cases, this is all we can get. An animal's inaccessible or it's floating, you can't really get to it to take measurements or samples. So we do take a lot of photographs, measurements. We do have standardized data sheets that go into our national database, as well as different morphometric forms and other things that the responders can use. The next step after documentation, photos, measurements, would be an external exam. So you're looking all over the body for tags or marks. For instance, the animal in the bottom right there is one of our rehab animals. So that was brought into care, rehabbed, released, and then found dead. And so certainly that's unfortunate that it passed away, but we could learn something about the success of our rehab program from tracking these animals. These external exams can again take place on the beach, like in the first photo, or in a laboratory setting, like the one there with the dolphin. And then, of course, the next level beyond that's an internal exam or full necropsy. This, again, can either happen in the field or the lab. If it's a whale, of course, it's going to happen in the field. For instance of this turtle, of course, we could do that in the lab as well. And then lots of specimen collection. So I mentioned one of the things we're looking at and tracking are human interactions. Vessel collisions are something that definitely affects our large whales as well as our sea turtles. Entanglement in fishing gear and marine debris primarily affects our pinnipeds and our large whales, as well as some of our dolphin species too. And then ingestion of fishing gear and marine debris, again, in this case, primarily turtles getting hooked and or eating plastics. Of course, we do have our live response side, and the first part of that is the rescue. And so again, just like in the dead side, you're gonna document, you're gonna assess, and so that's the first step here. The folks on the beach are going to take a look at the behavior, the external condition of the animal, determine if it needs to be rescued and taken into rehab, or relocated maybe to a different part of the beach. Maybe it's around too many people or something like that, or maybe it's perfectly healthy and we leave it at site. Or maybe it's not healthy and we leave it at site. So if you're taking a look at these two animals, a sea lion pup or a bull elephant seal, obviously we are not going to be able to move that bull elephant seal into rehab. And so in that case, you'd probably leave it at the beach. So once we decide, a response is necessary, warranted, we will capture or sedate the animals. In most cases, that's done through these nets right here, these pole nets, and we're able to capture the animals. In some cases, where the animal is in a difficult position, like it's hauled out on a dock, or it's too large, we might need to sedate it first. And then upon closer look, you're able to decide if this animal is a good candidate for rehab, or if perhaps humane euthanasia, right there on site is warranted. And then next, we'll transport the animals back to the rehab facilities. This involves specialized equipment. Obviously, we have the nets there. We also have these crowding boards. Essentially, just they're big pieces of plywood that are used to kind of move animals around without actually physically handling them. So if we need to harass an animal or relocate an animal to a different part of the beach, that's something that we might do. In addition to perhaps even trying to board it into a kennel. And you can see those kennels in the back of the truck there. All of our organizations are equipped with these specialized equipment for response. The next level after the rescue or live response is our rehab and release. And so the very first step of that, of course, is stabilization. So getting the animal in to care, trying to figure out exactly what might be going on with it, giving it some fluids, potentially warming it up. So we have world-class veterinary care and husbandry that assists us with that. The next step, of course, is rehabilitation, and this could be very short term. Perhaps an animal just has a hook in its flipper and just needs to be removed and looked at for a couple of days, or it could be long-term rehabilitation. We have specialized rehab facilities that are inspected by NOAA. The animals are receiving restaurant quality food and in many cases around the clock care. So very good place to be. And ideally, if they make it through rehab, they are nice and plump like this guy right here, and they get released into the wild. Of course, if that's not possible, there certainly are cases where the animals are not good candidates for release. And in those cases, we'll work with partners to find a permanent care facility, either at a research facility or at Azure Aquarium. One other thing that we do is tagging. You can see that orange tag there on that animal I mentioned earlier is a rehab tag. So this is something put on by the researcher or by the rehab centers when they release the animals back into the wild. There are also similar tags used by researchers at the different haul out spots and rookeries. And so again, the orange tag is kind of a opportunistic way of sighting the animals. And then we also have other mechanisms like the satellite tags that you see here on this female sea lion. And so what we'll do sometimes is actually during one of the previous DA years, we actually tagged some pups that were rescued at the centers and then sent them out to the Channel Islands and actually released them off the Channel Islands. And so we're going to jump here actually to the Islands and to San Miguel Island. This beautiful scene out here, this is a photo I took one year when I was out helping the NOAA researchers conduct research on San Miguel, and you can just see the sheer number of sea lions. This is just one corner of one beach of one island of the Channel Islands. On these beaches, you'll see California sea lions, northern fur seals, northern elephant seals, and then in some areas you'll see harbor seals and Guadalupe fur seals as well. And so California sea lions are utilizing these islands almost all year long. And you can see here sort of the annual cycle for the females and the pups, essentially giving birth in June. There you can see the months laid out. Giving birth in June, of course, the pups are dependent for many months, and we see the early weaning and peak weaning in the early spring. But so that's when we're used to seeing a lot of pups come in is during that weaning period. But the last couple of years we have seen something a little bit different. So in summer 22, 23 and 24, especially 23, we had a harmful algal bloom driven by offshore upwelling of nutrients. In early June, the Channel Islands saw an increase in sea lion and common dolphin strandings. That's a big one for us, the common dolphin strandings. We get them, you know, fairly regularly, but not in the numbers and in the short time frame that we got them in these years. And this included quite a few live strands as well. So by mid to late June, more strandings were coming in. So initially it started around Santa Barbara and then moved into LA and Orange counties. These numbers here are honestly just for 2023, 1,000 plus live and dead stranded sea lions. Of course, not all of those animals came into care. The dead ones, of course, were just responded to and sampled. There certainly were live animals that were left on beaches and left in areas, and I'll get to some of those limitations of response a little bit later. We also had 120 dead stranded common dolphins, which is just an unheard of number, essentially. Most of those were in the Santa Barbara and Ventura area. Like I said, some of those were live strands, but they all died on the beach. Interestingly enough, or not interestingly enough, but as we might expect with DA, many of the dead sea lions and dolphins were pregnant or lactating females. One interesting thing to note is fur seals were not impacted hugely in this event, but they had higher levels of DA when tested versus the sea lions. So that was kind of an interesting find as well, and may have something to do with their feeding strategy. We used to consider these domoic acid outbreaks as unusual events, and then actually called them unusual mortality events, which is an important term within NOAA and the federal government, and actually opened up them to potentially receiving emergency funds from the government to help respond to the event. Fortunately or unfortunately, now these are not considered to be unusual events, as they're occurring fairly regularly, and so they have been deemed not eligible for those emergency funds moving forward. So it makes us have to sort of rethink how we respond to these as they're becoming more regular. So real quickly, I reached out to one of our Stranding Network partners, the group that responds in Santa Barbara, and I asked them for some insights and things that they saw, like directly from the responders. They said each year there were some early indicators, and so again, we'd expect to maybe see animals coming in June or July with DA, but what they'll start to do is see animals in May or June with like these suspect cases of DA. So these are very mild. They're in good body weight. They're not exhibiting seizures or head weaving. Not like extreme versions of that. They might just look a little funny, or they might just be hanging out on the beach where they shouldn't be for long periods of time. So their animals are brought into care, and then what they've noticed is that some of them will have eating issues in rehab, and this has kind of become one of their early indicators. Of course, eating issues are not necessarily DA. It could be other reasons. So then that's when they start collecting fecal and urine to test for DA. From what I've been told, fecal, it takes a little bit longer for the DA to show up in fecal, is what I've been hearing, but it's easier to collect opportunistically, whereas the urine's better to test, but it's harder to collect from a live animal. So after these first few cases where they're doing some testing, looking at these early indicators, of course, we're starting to see more animals trickle in. In 2024, this actually started in early July. And then over the next 2 weeks, essentially all hell breaks loose, and we get hundreds of strandings coming ashore. And again, during the height of the event, then in the midsummer, all probable DA cases, those that are exhibiting seizures or head weaving, are tested, and then those levels are compared. So the basic basic response that we have, and this is kind of shortened version, but for DA specific, essentially the hotline responds to the calls, and sometimes this is hundreds of calls a day. The responders, either over the phone or in person, will assess whether rescue is warranted. There's certainly reasons why it wouldn't be. When the animals are brought into rehab, they are given fluids. Essentially, that's all that they can get is fluids, in the hope that the DA exposure is acute and that it can be flushed from their system. So essentially, you bring them in, you give them fluids and just wait and see what happens. There are some new drug combos that are being investigated at some of the facilities, but essentially the main method of care is flushing the system. And you can imagine when you have a day like you can see in the picture right there, where you have a dead dolphin on the beach, as well as 4 impacted and seizing sea lions, that there might be limitations to how much you can respond. And so time of day certainly is one, depending on if you're getting the call late in the evening. Driving distances, especially in some of the places where our coastlines are inaccessible, or you have to drive through a city. It could take an hour to get from one side of a county to another. Beach accessibility, especially in the Santa Barbara area, where we have cliffs and beaches that you can't access safely. The size or sex of an animal. Of course, if we have a large, an elephant seal or a bull, probably not going to be bringing those in. We have to think about the rehab patient space. So you can't house an adult male with an adult female with a pup. So you got to kind of have those separated. So there are different numbers of different species and age classes and sexes that can be sort of shuffled around in a facility. So that's also a big limiter. Of course, there's personnel concerns. You got to have someone on the hotline to respond to those calls. You got to have a response person to go out. You got to have a rehab person to be there. And those often cannot be the same person. And you often need a bunch of them, especially if you're getting calls all day, every day. And of course, that leads to compassion fatigue. So it's not just having the people there, but then also making sure that those individual people don't get burnt out. And then of course, limited funds. A lot of these groups are nonprofits or universities where they can't directly make money. They have to ask for it. And there are some federal funds, but I think we all know that the future is a little uncertain there. That's all I'll say about that. But there certainly are some concerns about future funding for this network and their ability to respond. So recognizing some of those limitations, in 2023, we had a huge influx of sea lions. So it was right after they had hit Santa Barbara, came down to LA County, off Redondo Beach, just, right July 4th, of course, the first perfect weekend for them to come and hang out with all the people. So millions of people on the beach and hundreds of dead, dying adult sea lions, multiple biting incidents reported. The public was very concerned. The city was very concerned. The Marine Mammal Care Center of Los Angeles was completely maxed out. And so we supported the city in constructing a resting station, essentially. So that's this sort of three-walled fenced structure that you see here. It was put in a quiet area away from people, essentially right up along a river and then a berm, and lots of, I guess, the barriers there to sort of keep people away. And then essentially that door was opened and the animals were allowed to exit as they wanted to, but we sort of brought them in there if they were just hanging out on the beach and looked like they were in a dangerous spot. We moved them in there. This was not done under the stranding agreement. This was partnered with the city under a different part of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. This was effective in reducing human and animal interactions, but we still have questions around what the long-term effects of DA are, how ethical it is to put these animals back out into the ocean, especially if they have neurological damage, are they going to be able to survive and thrive? And then, how we determine on the beach, if an animal's chronic or acute and if it needs to come into care or if it can stay on the beach. And so those are things that we're still trying to figure out. Next, I want to kind of get into the data collection. So all of our data gets submitted to the Marine Mammal Health and Stranding Response Program's national database, and that's done within 30 days of the stranding. However, all cetaceans and ESA species are reported to NOAA within 24 hours, but the full that gets shared within 30 days. The rehab 30 days after the animal is released or dies in care. We do have monthly calls where we provide monthly tallies of just the numbers of animals that we've had, and that includes animals in house. So that gets us the ability to kind of keep an eye on those capacity limits. But it's not the best way, of doing it. And luckily, depending on how you look at it, we have a new federal mandate coming very soon to create a new health map database. This is kind of getting into the One Health mind of tracking these events. And so it'll store more information on the samples and results, include new fields related to disease, incorporate environmental and health assessment data, which is really cool. And then of course, the best part about it is it's going to allow for easy data visualizations of all of those data sets together, which we're very excited about. So that should be coming online in the next few years. As far as DA data collection goes, we're kind of still trying to figure out the best ways to do this. Certainly during the events themselves, we have more frequent check-in calls. There's several tracking sheets that are sort of spread around, and this has led to some confusion. So we're going to perhaps try to work on that. And many of the network facilities have their own internal tracking that they're doing, because again, not all these animals are getting rescued, so they're not necessarily getting into our database. The animals that are just watched or monitored and kept on the beach, wouldn't get database entry. Unfortunately, DA does not have its own field in the MMHSRP database, so it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint those cases. Any symptoms or test results are usually recorded in the comment section, so that's usually queried on keywords, Demoic, DA, seasoning, etc. So that's kind of the way we have right now of collecting the data after the fact. Our plan for dealing with this, and actually this is going to be the feature of the next month or so, is creating a group event within our database, which will allow us to better track historic cases and future cases. And then this will transfer over to the new health map. So we'll be able to, in the future, better track what kind of the extent of these events. I think that's the end of my time. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
So
And
awesome.
if I
Okay.
totally missed the section 2, please, I can probably answer questions unrelated to this too if I missed something.
Thank you so much. Also, that last slide is really cute. I love the question marks on the. Okay. Anyone have questions? If you want to just raise your hands, we can take those. Amy, do you see any? I don't see any, but I have a question. Yeah, so it seems like, some of these animals will be released back with some neurological damage. And I'm wondering, you're saying that some of them do get tagged. Is it very common to see those tagged animals coming back? And do you have any statistics on what kind of percentage of released animals are coming back?
Yeah, so it's sort of two things there. The ones that we had tagged that I mentioned went out to the Channel Islands were actually pups of DA females. So it came in with the pup, or it gave birth in rehab, and so we had this dependent pup, which even adds even another level of want to release this animal, will it thrive? And so that was why we had tagged those ones and released them back on the Channel Islands to see if these pups of exposed animals can at least survive. We got some initial results from the satellite tags, but haven't encountered any of those animals since then. And given the populations and the wide-ranging spaces, I'm not super surprised. The flip side of that, though, is certainly we have had animals where we have released them, put a little orange tag on them, and seen them days later in the same spot or other spots, especially when they've had DA exposure. So it's not uncommon for us to have a 2-3 strike animal where eventually they choose that they need to humanely euthanize it.
Thank you. It looks like Becky also has a question.
Yeah, Becky Stanton-Weha. I was just going to mention, we've been trying, and we're following up with Justin offline, but we've been trying to track these domoic acid animals through the cooperation with the stranding network and the rescue facilities, as well as through our partners at Southern California Ocean Observing System, otherwise known as SCOOS, to try to put these into the CEC system. So it'll be interesting as we keep working toward optimizing that as best we can, and then maybe at some point that health map database will coordinate directly. But I just wanted folks to know we are trying to track these for the state level as well. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of challenges in trying to work through that. So thank you for all the assistance with that.
And thank you for providing that information. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't touch on it much in the presentation, maybe just in the many spreadsheets mentioned there. But that's one thing that's currently happening is your community and the health community has really reached out to our organizations in a great way. And so I think in some ways that has been the best way for them to get that direct information instead of going through a NOAA system or a network system, is just to go directly to the organization. that does perhaps provides or lead to some confusion in the grand scheme of tracking of things. But that's sort of on us to coordinate that. So we're working to try to maybe streamline that as we move into potentially another season of this. But yeah, have definitely appreciated the partnership of your community and the health community.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question in the chat here from Christine Job. She says, considering that these events are becoming more common and expected, and that federal funding may be, sorry, scrolling, reduced in the future, what actions are being taken to increase funding support within the state?
That is a fantastic question. Yeah, so one thing that is being done is the leads of some of the largest organizations, those that have the largest staff and cover large areas, especially those with big cities, San Francisco, LA, have really been turning back to the city and county health organizations to say, hey, we're providing this frontline monitoring, health monitoring. We are working on both public safety, this animal human interaction interface, as well as, disease monitoring. These are sentinel species. And so one of the things they're doing is trying to go back to those local municipalities to get support. And there has been some success in that, which is really good. And we're pleased with that. There are some organizations that are not going to be able to lobby their local governments that way because maybe the local governments don't have that support. And so it's really important that as we go into these events that we set expectations with the public and with the local authorities that these stranding network partners are not mandated or required or have to do this work. They are permitted by us to do it if they choose to do it, but they are not uh, your taxpayer dollars aren't going directly to them as if you might say the police department or the fire department and have the same expectations. And so understanding that not all animals are going to go into care, some of them are actually better off left on the beach, especially if we think that they might just be an acute case where the animal can get out of it on the beach. So it's both finding new sources and setting realistic expectations for the public.
Thank you. All right, and last question from Shannon Murphy, and then we'll have to move on.
Thanks so much, Justin. Excellent talk. Really appreciate bringing this to the forefront for the CCHAB, that HABs are in the marine space as well as in the inland waters. And to that point, as part of the HAB illness work group that is comprised of our 4 agencies, so Water Board, CDFW, OEHA, and CDPH, we're also tracking these marine HAB-related illnesses, as Becky mentioned. And so this is getting motivated to the OHABs, or the CDC's One Health harmful algal bloom system, right? That is run primarily by epidemiologists, and they're tending to look at these events more through the human health perspective and to some lesser extent domestic animals such as dogs. However, being able to report these types of illnesses on the marine mammal side as well as fish and wildlife is really elevating to another state agency how impactful these HAB events for these coastal states. And we're one of the 16 that are currently reporting, is one of the current 16 states reporting to the federal level. And so again, it's just bringing to light and to a different federal audience how impactful these ongoing and persisting, and now we're seeing multiple year in a row events are. So thank you so much for sharing this information, and we'll check in with you online about how to better capture the data that you folks in the Stranding Network are collecting. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate being included in this conversation and perhaps could join again to when we do have results and findings of those sorts of things. And yeah, the impacts are really important both on the animal side and the community and the uh, transmission of the illness, but also how it affects the facility's ability to care for other animals and to maintain their level of response and care moving forward when they just get completely inundated with both animals and angry people during these events. So I appreciate other groups recognizing that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Justin. That was a fabulous presentation and a great way to start our fish and wildlife themed meeting today. So yeah, please reach out to him if you have further questions by email. And yeah, we'll move on to our next agenda item here, which will be the program updates from all around the state. And so we'll start. Marissa, did you want to start with your first update?
Hey there, Karen. Yeah,
Hey.
Jamie checked in with me, wanted me to start this
Also,
session. So
Justin, I think you're still sharing. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
all right, should be sharing my screen.
I can see it.
Oh, let me go back one. Apologies. Yeah, hey, hello everyone in CCHAB network. Thanks for joining us today. I was asked to start off this part of the agenda. So I'm with the California Water Boards. I'm Marissa Van Dyke, one of the managers of the statewide freshwater and estuarine harmful algal bloom program. So again, at the water boards, which makes up from the regional boards and the state. And also part of our CAB program is also Karen, who's facilitating this meeting at Fish and Wildlife. Just wanted to kind of bring that all together. So I'm just going to give a little overview of the statewide program and introduce some of the speakers from our program, and then hand it off to them. All right, so just a brief update for CCHAB network members. Just, kind of a reminder of who we are, who all makes up this program at the water boards. So we have regional boards, and they each have a HAB coordinator. The full-time funded staff are highlighted here in green. So we have full-time funded staff, Michael Thomas in the North Coast, who will be providing an update today. Also in the Central Valley Regional Board, Dana Schultz has an update. We also have Sabrina Rice, a full-time staffer in Lahontan. And then as resources allow, these other coordinators fill in on that and primarily coordinate HAB event response, and that communication helps get emergency sampling kit out to our partners, or also coordinate that sampling themselves. We also have an update from Regional Board 8, Santa Ana, from Kirk Larkin. And we also have an update from Carrie Kowalski in San Diego region, or Region 9. All right, so where you can find the resources that are provided from our program and all of our partners, particularly Department of Fish and Wildlife, OWIHA, so Toxicology Perspective, Department of Public Health, also Department of Water Resources. You can find this on the California FHABS portal. The link is right here. We primarily have information that answers these 4 primary questions of where are HABs? So, satellite imagery, or where are the reports occurring across California? And then, how the public can be informed to stay safe and protect their pets, livestock, their family. We also host on here the CCHAB network standardized voluntary guidance on how to respond to blooms in recreational waters, including, a quick response plan, the thresholds for posting, and those pre-made signs, and standardized procedures for sampling. And as we brought up, HAB reports map, we've populated that from any online reports that are submitted to the water boards through this online report form. It can take in suspected blooms from the public, confirmed blooms from monitoring agencies. Also, any concerns about illnesses can also be submitted with our online report form. And after validation, they are published to our web map. All right, so I just wanted to give a little recap for our holiday assessments. So these are 3 events that occur before the major summer holidays. So starting with Memorial Day and ending with Labor Day weekend. We partner with a lot of CCHAB members here to collect samples around the state for each of these events. And we were able to sample 79 sites for the first holiday weekend, around 4th of July, 63 sites, and then pre-Labor Day weekend, normally when the blooms are at peak, we were able to cover 90 sites sampling. And each year we provide some resources to support the partners as much as we can, at minimum a sampling kit and the procedures. And if we have the funds, also support for lab analysis. So watch for that announcement as we get close to May next year again, on what available resources there will be to support these pre-holiday assessments that have been occurring since 2018. All right, so some statewide products that we're looking forward to. I'm just going to highlight one just to keep this short and allow everyone to provide their updates. So we've been working on assessment approaches for freshwater HABs and inland waters using satellite remote sensing data. In this report, it's been multiple years in process developed by technical advisors and also user group. We're developing this report to standardize procedures on how to calculate and analyze remotely sensed imagery data, how to process that to answer some key monitoring questions that we have across the state at different spatial scales to understand the occurrence of harmful algal blooms. In that report, we are collecting the information on what the known quality is of the satellite imagery data at the different scales and depending on what metrics you're measuring. So if you're looking at the magnitude or more like the occurrence data, it's a little bit different kind of calculation and way to think about it. So we're considering also what kind of quality control criteria can be applied to that data so that you understand what confidence you can have. So you can apply those data to answer different monitoring questions and also inform water management as well. As part of this, we are going to be producing open source data processing code for how to calculate the data. It'll be also published as well in journals. And one of the key products that we made to the public, likely around March, is a visualization tool. So we're developing a dashboard where you can actually play around with the data and see what it looks like for different spatial scales that you're looking at. And also the report will highlight some gaps that we have to be able to better use that data as well. So it's something folks are looking forward to as well, where we can expand and strengthen. This is a snapshot of that visualization that we're speaking to. So developing a dashboard with our contractor so you can actually see the remotely sensed data calculated for you at the spatial scale that you want to look at. So right now, this is a snapshot of the statewide spatial scale, and it shows in these like kind of blue polygons, which resolvable lakes and wide channels are available to be processed with satellite imagery. You can determine what kind of quality you want to apply to it, and then choose, what question you're asking. What's the frequency of HABs? What's the spatial extent? So you can go like, to regional, to water body specific spatial extent, that kind of thing, and go through these different calculations. And when you do that, depending on the temporal scale that you choose, then you can get key graphics, right? You can get actual bar charts or plots that you can download, you can put in presentations and in your reports and understand a little bit more about what the satellite imagery is saying for this area that you're looking at. And satellite imagery is really important to us because of the lack of statewide monitoring, ambient monitoring for HABs. So we find that with the field data that we do have, satellite imagery is quite complementary. And so together we can start building that picture of what the extent is, as the trends are of harmful algal blooms. And that's the end of my section. I'm going to hand it off to the next regional coordinators that are going to be presenting. I believe it's North Coast region. Thank you.
Mike, I know you had some slides to share.
Yep.
Thanks.
How are we looking?
Looking good. Thanks.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Good morning. My name is Mike Thomas. I am the FHAB program lead at the North Coast region. I work closely with Rich Fadness, who is our swamp lead. Just a quick season update for routine monitoring in the Klamath Basin. There was microsystems monitoring by the tribal consortium up there. The tribes shown here. Obviously, things are looking a little different now since Copco and Iron Gate reservoirs are no more. So we were seeing less microsystems hits this year. Big Lagoon, there was biweekly microsystems monitoring conducted by the Big Lagoon Rancheria. And on the Russian River, we had biweekly cyanobacteria ID conducted by Sonoma Water. Just a quick look at our pre-holiday assessments for the year. You could see the 7 water bodies listed here on the left, the sampling entity. We did Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, but also a post-holiday sample. And what you can see is a lot of green here. So not very many advisories this year, thankfully, except for Lake Pillsbury. We did have a caution on Labor Day and a danger for the post-holiday. And this is just a quick snapshot of the regional postings this year, broken down by bloom type, so benthic, planktonic, and then we also had reports of a couple of marine blooms. So as you can see, a lot of toxic algae alerts in the various rivers and creeks in the region, a handful of cautions, that danger at Lake Pillsbury, and then, yeah, 2 cautions along the Del Norte and Sonoma County coast. Illness reports. We did have reports of human illnesses as well as dog illnesses, and then unfortunately a couple of dog deaths. Much of these were determined not to be FHAB related, whether that's because they were visually confirmed or there was just insufficient information. The dog deaths in the Eel River did occur on private property, so we were not able to get out there and look exactly what was going on. So that determination is still somewhat in progress. Just some other things going on for the CCHAB benthic subcommittee, which there will be an update today. The North Coast region drafted a couple of memos evaluating the tiered monitoring recommendations that we developed for benthic cyanobacteria in rivers. And then we also have a memo describing spat and percent cover thresholds that we have presented to the benthic subcommittee for use. We did participate in the US EPA ROAR project for the 2nd year. And this year we deployed spats about every 2 miles in the South Fork Eel River. And this was really to get a handle on, how many spats are needed to characterize benthic blooms in a riverine system. So US EPA will be analyzing those results, and we'll just see where that goes. University of Nevada, Reno, we're collaborating with them, and they're looking at spatial variation and antitoxin production within and across river networks in California. And then finally, we had a series of trainings this year. It's a virtual and field components. We did 3 field trainings this year in the Scott River, South Fork Eel, and Russian River. If you're interested, you can find the link to the recording in these slides here. And if you would like a handout of the slides, just feel free to reach out to me. And here's a list of all our North Coast partners who really make this program possible. So with that, that is my update. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. All right, now we'll move on to East Bay Regional Parks District. I think we have Hal here. If you want to give us a little update.
Hello, Hal McLean, East Bay Regional Parks. Thank you. All right, I was going to kind of give a overview of our seasons there. Big break was clear till July 19th. And then from July 19th to September 20th, we were at a danger. September 20th to the October 25th, we're at a caution. And then October 25th to the present, we're at a danger. It looks like it's probably going to come down. Well, we need 2 weeks of low toxins to downgrade to caution. And that was one of the issues with trying to get Lake Anza off of a danger all year. We did have 2 weeks of good results. And then in September, at around September 24th, but then our very next sample was high, and so we went back to a danger. The same thing happened October 9th, and before we could even post a caution, we got another danger. And so it really shows a variety of weather conditions and toxins in that lake. We're currently at a danger, and we'll be probably making a recommendation this week if we get low results. But it's been about a month of good results, but we're just being cautious about it. It's currently closed to swimming. Del Val was at a caution from May 23rd to June 11th, and then the East Beach has been green since, has had good water quality. The West Beach was at was good that same time, but then in July 3rd to September 30th, it went to a caution, and since October, it's been at a green, and we only allow swimming north of the boat launch, and it's been looking really good out there. Lake Chabot went to a danger in March, and then it went back to a caution in October 7th, and then November 6th went back to a danger. So we're currently at a danger. Shadow Cliffs was at a caution from April through June, and then it went to a green light with no advisories, and then in July 25th, it went to caution due to benthics. The arroyo at Shadow Cliffs was green until October 28th, and then it went to a caution due to benthics. Temescal was at a danger from March until July 18th, and it's been at a caution since. Quarry Lakes has been at a caution since May or March, now May 22nd. And then we had a red tide at Encinal Beach from August 19th to October 31st. We didn't have any reports or documentation that it went beyond Encinal Beach area to our Crown Beach area or anywhere else. So that's our update. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much. Marissa, did you want to quickly fill in for the folks who aren't here, regions 2 through 4? Or should I skip them? Okay.
That's all right.
Thanks.
Just share the screen again. All right, so just briefly filling in. So we're just continuing down our from north to south for regional boards. So thanks, Hal, for the update on the East Bay of San Francisco Bay. And also there's regional board 2, and those folks are not available today. So just briefly giving an update. So any changes that we've seen since the last network update has been that there's been some red algae that has come into some channels in the San Mateo area that we were able to monitor and support the county in how to respond to that to protect public health. Also, there was concern about in San Jose, Lake Almaden, particularly before a major festival where kids would kind of like wade into the park lake, even though it doesn't normally have water contact allowed. It was for a lantern festival, so we were able to coordinate some monitoring in time to inform what advisory is appropriate and help guide those activities to prevent skin contact, because that bloom really was along the shorelines quite dense. And that's the update for San Francisco region, except that the staff that normally provide support for the FAB program, one of the positions has been removed due to state budget cuts. So we're going to be reevaluating how we can cover this area going forward, which is really unfortunate. So going next would be the Central Coast. So more around Monterey and Santa Cruz. Melissa Daughtry wasn't able to join with us today. Again, she covers also the ambient monitoring program there in the whole region. And we don't have any updates since the last network meeting for that area. And then for Region 4, that would be the Los Angeles area. Let's scroll out a little bit. All right, so we've continued to, publish the Department of Water Resources monitoring in that area for, Pyramid Lake, Quail Lake, so forth. We have gotten some, observations of red tide, that kind of thing, and working with all the different partners to respond there, to coordinate that response. And then there was a little bit more monitoring with LA City and County parks on a few lakes. So that data, that was around October to help inform if a few park lakes could be deposted. And that's the extent of the update for Region 4. So I'll hand it back to you all.
Thank you, Marissa. And now we have Dana at Region 5.
Hello, I have some slides I can pull up real quick. Okay,
Looks good.
looks good. Okay. Hi, I'm Dana Schultz at the Central Valley Regional Water Board. I wanted to highlight two of our partner monitoring programs from this summer to start. So we're continuing a partnership with Restore the Delta. They're sampling along the Stockton waterfront and San Joaquin River. They visit 7 sites from May through September this past summer. They go out weekly and do sonde measurements and do the rapid microcystin strip tests. And then monthly, they collect samples to send to the lab for microcystin ELISA analysis. This lab work is funded by the Division of Water Rights. This summer, there was just 2 microcystin detects in these samples. One was warranting a caution level advisory, and the other one was below the caution level, so no advisory. And I also wanted to thank Restore the Delta staff. They schedule their ELISA lab sampling events to contribute to the FHAB program pre-holiday assessments. So thank you for contributing to that. The other partner monitoring program we had this summer was with Tulare County Environmental Health. So they had selected 4 sites along Lake Cahuilla and the Cahuilla River. They collected water grabs, deployed spat, and then did benthic grabs if they saw any benthic growth. We analyzed these samples for microcystin, saxitoxin, anatoxin, and cylindrospermopsin. Maybe I can present the results of this at our next CCHAB meeting. So those were our 2 big partner monitoring programs this summer. For pre-holiday assessments, here are the results for the most recent pre-Labor Day assessment. So Region 5 Fresno staff went out and sampled Hensley and Eastman lakes. Hensley had no advisories and Eastman had a caution advisory. We supported a couple samples from Clear Lake with Big Valley sampling. There's 3 sites and one had no advisory, another had a danger, and another had a warning. And then the state board also supported some additional sampling at Pine Mountain Lake and a nearby bass pond. And Pine Mountain Lake had no advisory, and the nearby pond had a caution advisory. And then like those numbers Marissa presented of how many sites that we were able to sample with pre-holiday assessment, I just want to say thanks to the other partners and monitoring programs who contributed data to inform the advisories during the pre-holiday periods. And then this is a snapshot of our map that Marissa was just presenting as the advisory stood at the end of the day, Monday. So we had a couple danger advisories at Big Break and Concha Loma in our region, a warning at San Luis Reservoir, a few cautions at Clear Lake.
I didn't do.
A visual bloom observation down in the Delta, Old River, and Grant Line Canal, and an algal mat alert at North Fork American River at Mineral Bar. And I think reading through this, I'll point out that these are thanks to our partners, because these are all advisories based on monitoring programs from different entities in the area. And with that, I'll pass it to the next region.
Thanks, Dana. And Region 7, Marissa, would you mind filling in for them?
Oh, you skipped Region 6.
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Sabrina, Region 6. Thank you for
So-
pointing that out.
I was gonna say something too, so thank you. Yeah, I will share my screen. Switching my screen on me, so can you see my slides?
Looks good. Yep.
Okay, yeah, so most of our monitoring for the season is done, so I was just gonna do a little bit of our season in review. So, yeah, okay. So yeah, this is the number of water bodies we've had for each advisory type. And this is just the highest advisory reached. Every year our region likes to have this reported out. And I am always a little iffy on this chart because it doesn't show really the level of work we put in for the season, but it is cool to track just how many water bodies have reached these level of advisories. Caution does include our visual advisories. And then this is just giving, I know it's really small, just wanted to give kind of a general overview of like the extent of our region and you know, how far we've had to go and where these advisories are occurring. So they are pretty spread out throughout our region. And the last chart I did forget to add our algal alert advisories, but we did have 2 in the region. And then here is just some general images of what has occurred in our region. I always like to just show kind of the worst visuals we've seen. And interestingly, we had a few really high microcystin levels this summer. Bridgeport Reservoir came in first, and I was like, wow, I think this is the highest toxin levels I've seen in our region for the year. And then a couple days later, Crowley came in screaming high here at 20,000 micrograms per liter of microcystin. These were all microcystin blooms. And Bridgeport and Crowley and Diaz were our danger advisories for the year. Last year, our highest microcystin detection was 416 at Indian Creek Reservoir, and that water body only reached a caution advisory this year, thankfully. And then this chart, I know it's kind of busy, but it shows just kind of what's gone on over the years in our program. So it's showing the top line here showing how many samples we've collected over the years. These numbers sometimes range based on funding available or you know, just level of response we're actually performing. And then again, the number of advisories this year, kind of the biggest difference in our response was we had a lot of illnesses reported. And this shows the number reported to us that we had to investigate. And then this bottom line is the illnesses that were confirmed to be HAB related by the illness work group. And then one is still in progress, I believe. We had, I think it's 11 burros were reported dead in the Mojave Park. And I forget the water body name. It's like hot something. But that one's still under investigation. And then kind of monitoring we performed, kind of the same as all the other regions, but we analyze new and reoccurring blooms. We have an incident response of individuals report blooms to us, we do respond. And again, when we have illness reports, that's part of that incident response process. We have had 2 special studies this season. Red Lake monitoring is a continuation of a monitoring program that started in 2019 in partnership with Alpine Watershed Group. And this year, CDFW also helped support that monitoring. And then we did a benthic stream investigation this year of the Little Truckee River, Big Meadows Creek, and Upper Truckee River. We have never really done any benthic monitoring in Region 6. So this was kind of dipping our toes a little bit into benthic monitoring to see kind of what kind of the issues could be if we are seeing benthic HABs in the region. And you know, of course we did, wasn't super high levels, but you know, of course, benthics are everywhere. And then partner monitoring, we partnered with Inyo County Environmental Health. They do monthly monitoring at Diaz Lake, Mill Pond, and Pleasant Valley Reservoir, and occasionally the Owens River just below Pleasant Valley Reservoir. And then Los Angeles Department of Water and Power shared their monitoring data with us monthly this season. And then, of course, the pre-holiday assessments. And here's just a table outlining how much monitoring we did for the pre-holiday assessments. This one's a little bit, it does show a little bit more of the level of effort we put into monitoring water bodies throughout our region. Labor Day is obviously when we have the most water bodies monitored. We do typically see our blooms later in the season. So we do a post-holiday assessment as well, that you can see we had our 3 danger advisories during that assessment. And then all of this would not be possible without all these partners. Our region is very large, and if I was doing it alone, I do not think it'd be possible. So thank you to everyone who has helped. And as always, if there's anyone interested in assisting with these assessments, please let me know. And that is it.
All right. Thanks, Sabrina. You've been busy. Yeah. And Marissa, Region 7, now for real.
Jeff's here too.
Hey,
Oh, okay,
Josh.
great.
So let me hand it over to you.
Come on by.
Okay.
All right.
So I think I mentioned before, my region's cut back our monitoring as far as HABs goes to just holiday assessments. But we now have a new executive officer, and I'm really optimistic that that's going to change. So I'll keep you updated on that. Weast Lake, it's a small lake in Imperial Valley. It's kind of surrounded by agricultural land. It's kind of our problem child. There was a fish kill earlier this year. We did a little investigating and we attributed it to HABs. There was a bloom present at the time. It's had a perpetual bloom. It's been closed to swimming, and it's a county park, so it's kind of a swimming hole for the locals. So we're trying to get that reopened. The county tried an ultrasonic device that sends out, I guess, ultrasonic waves, and it's supposed to lyse the cells and kill the bacteria, but it's not working as they hoped. So I'm going to meet with the county on the 27th. We're going to collect some sediment samples, some water samples. We're going to look at nutrients to try this composition on the bottom. We're just going to try and look at everything and try and figure out what is going on here. Then last, I've got Lake Havasu. This is a collaboration among multiple agencies. It was supposed to start in May of 24, and we still haven't gotten it off the ground yet. We've done all the planning. Everything's ready to go. We secured 1 boat, but we need a second boat. That's kind of what's been holding us up. We're going to have a meeting, a technical advisory group meeting with the field team in December to talk about a start date in February of 2025. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks for that update. And we can move on to Region 8. Kurt. You sound quite quiet to me, at least.
Yeah,
Kurt.
let me load up my slides.
Oh, okay.
Anybody see that?
Yes, I can. Oh, it looks like I'm looking at presenter view. But we can see your slides.
If you want to, above the bigger image that just showed up on your screen, on the top, the display settings, you can toggle to presenter view to help you out.
So,
Okay.
would it be helpful to come back to you, Kirk? Oh, we can't really hear you either. Maybe I'll give you a second and we'll come back to you if that's okay.
Is that's still not showing up, right?
Oh, now it's there. Yeah, this is fine. You can just show we're just seeing
I
your
just go
normal
this way.
screen. Yeah, okay, sounds
Okay,
good.
sorry about that. Sorry, it seems like I was having some issues here. Apologize for the delay. Kirk Larkin, Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control Board, FHAB coordinator for the region. So just going to give a quick snapshot of some information we have since our last CCHAB meeting. As Region 8 located in Southern California, incorporating parts of Riverside County, San Bernardino County, and Orange County. And then, so some of our monitoring activities, we participated in the pre-holiday sampling. So I'm going to share information we have for our pre-Labor Day sampling. Our staff, we're out sampling at Big Bear Lake, Lake Hemet, Lake Elsinore, as well as Mill Creek and Lytle Creek. On those particular locations, as you can see, we actually had 3 samples that were collected in Big Bear Lake. One of them was at a danger advisory. It was actually a supplemental sample where we had observed some scum and floating algal material that was suspicious. So it actually came back at a danger level. I have some more additional slides that provide more details on that. And then we actually had some additional monitoring data that was shared from Department of Water Resources and California State Parks for Lake Paris, as well as San Bernardino County Parks for Cucamonga, Gausti, the small and large lake. That came back as a caution. And then also for Glen Helen, both the small and large lake, and there was no advisory recommendations for those. And as I just briefly mentioned, here's additional details about Big Bear. So again, 3 samples were collected from Big Bear. Boulder Bay, which is located more in the south end of the lake. It's popular for people to hang out for the day. Also, there's a fishing pier. So one of the samples we collected was from the fishing pier itself, since a lot of the public like to take boats and go swimming in that area. So if it was representative of the contact they'd have. It came back with microsystems that were below the caution advisory at 0.63 micrograms per liter, but there were cyanoHABs that were present. But as I mentioned earlier, there was an area within Boulder Bay itself along the southeast corner of the cove that, as you see in the center picture, there was some appearance of cyanoHABs. So we had that analyzed for a scum algal mat sample. And it did come back at a danger level at 117 micrograms per liter. So with that being said, we elected to post a caution level for Boulder Bay as a whole. And then we also collected a sample down at Stanfield Cutoff, which is on the east end of the lake. And it had microsystems that came in just shy of the threshold, but it's close enough that we recommended a caution advisory for that location as well. Then moving on to Lake Hemet, 2 samples were collected at that location. Both of those showed cyanoHABs, but also presence of microcystins. Again, those levels were just below the caution advisory thresholds, but based on the presence of cyanoHABs and cyanotoxins being present, as well as just visual assessments, we recommended a lake-wide caution advisory for Lake Hemet for the pre-holiday, pre-Labor Day event. Lake Elsinore, our staff was sampled out at that lake as well, but the city, as well as with their contractor WSP, they do share sample data. Based on the results that they provided, there was a location at launch point near the boat ramp that came back with a microcystin level that was in the warning advisory level. Based on the conditions with the lake, typically if we have hit one location, as you can see here, there's 5 different locations. We actually issue a lake-wide advisory just to be precautious for public that are actively operating at that lake. Moving on to some of the HAB blooms that we had received and our incident response. Since our last meeting, there's 3, I believe I mentioned earlier in our August meeting about the Lake Evans and Mystic Lake bloom reports that came in. Those are still kind of ongoing after July, August sometime. We actually issued caution advisories for those based on sampling events, some sampling activities that we did, as well as visual assessments. For the Lake Evans event, we actually went out and sampled on several occasions. For Mystic Lake, we have CDFW staff that were out doing visual assessments and sampling events as well. For Mystic Lake, there was anatoxin that was detected below the caution advisory, but again, being erring on the caution, we went ahead and issued a caution advisory based on visual assessments. The third one on here is Lake Hemet. Is a report of a bloom and human illness. Again, based on the information provided in the report, as well as satellite imagery on erring on the caution, we recommended that caution advisory be posted for that lake as well. Looking at the remote sensing satellite imagery that's provided, these are a snapshot of 3 lakes that currently show potential for a cyanobacteria bloom. As you see here, Lake Elsinore is on the lower end of the spectrum. Lake Hemet's relatively small lake. In terms of looking at the overall size, is not that many pixels that are provided for data, but it potentially has a bloom that's occurring. And then Mystic Lake is been on the bloom report for some time, but it has a caution advisory that's posted for that as well. The last slide we have here, just kind of an update on the HAB reports map. We don't have a whole lot of recent data that shows here, but Department of Water Resources is sharing their data. So if you notice the green locations here near the city of Paris, but most of the data in our region is 30 days old, but we do update that as well. As I mentioned earlier, City Lake Elsinore, they are providing data. There should be a recent update on that side as well. And that's what I got to share.
All
Sorry
right.
again for the delay.
Thank you. No worries. And now we've got Region 9. Okay.
Yeah, let me pull up some slides. Let's see if this works. Okay, can you see those?
I can see slides.
Why is it not going? There we go. Okay. So hi, I'm Carrie Kowalski from San Diego region, and I have my partner who helps with the FHAB program, Debbie Woodward. She's also on the call today. And I know we only have a few minutes, and I kept mine short and sweet. So my update, it only includes pretty much what's happened in our region since our last update in August. So good news is that we only had a few incident responses. We had 3, but we only ended up sampling in 1 location, which was a report given to us by the San Diego River Park Foundation, an area along the San Diego River where unfortunately there are some homeless encampments and other activities where there are some folks that do come in contact with the water there. So we ended up sampling there and determined that it was actually non-toxic though, even though there was a bloom present at the time. And the other activities that we've done since the last update is to complete the sampling for our special study, which is, it's a screening study that we focused on small public ponds and lakes. A lot of them were focused around areas where we know that folks do some fishing, there's a recreational activity, and we had 14 sites on our list to screen. And if there was not a bloom present when we visited, we did not sample. In each of these sites, we visited multiple times throughout the bloom season, so through summer to early fall. So in the middle there, you'll see that 6 of our sites actually never ended up having a bloom, so we didn't sample. 5 of our sites, you can see on the left-hand side, we did end up sampling. However, the cyanotoxins were below trigger levels. And then on the right-hand side, 3 of our sites that we did sample with blooms, unfortunately did have either caution or warning levels of toxins. So not too bad for our first cut screening study. Good news for our region that only 3 out of our 14 sites came out to be toxic. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention about this study was that it was continuing to build our partnership with the Viejas tribal band of Kumeyaay Indians, and they had suggested a few sites that they wanted us to consider in this study. And as you can see, they ended up in that middle portion, so they didn't end up actually needing to be sampled, but still opens the door for future work with them. And that's all I had.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and finally, we have Brianne Zakata from DWR. I think she wanted to give a little update.
Hi, yes. I just have a very brief update. DWR's routine monitoring in the State Water Project is mostly done for this season, but we do have a few reservoirs that still have toxin detection. So we're continuing to sample weekly at those sites. So those are in Region 5, San Luis Reservoir. It was already mentioned that there's currently a warning advisory in place. So we're still sampling weekly at our sites there. And then in the Los Angeles region, Castaic Lake currently has a caution advisory, so we're sampling weekly there. And then Lake Paris in the Santa Ana region, it currently does not have an advisory, but our samples have consistently had low levels of cylindrospermopsin below the caution advisory trigger. We've been detecting that since September, so we're still sampling weekly there, and we'll continue to do so until we get 2 weeks of non-detects. That's all I have.
All right, thanks so much for the update. So we are running a little behind, so if you have questions for these folks, please feel free to email them. We're going to run right into the CCHAB updates now, starting with the benthic work group update. Thanks, Carly. See your slides.
Sorry. All right. Everyone with me? Okay. So I'm just the presenter for the group, but this is a huge effort with a lot of us, and I'm going to jump in since we're running late. Okay. So what I want to highlight is that this group reconvened in May 2023 to look at the current science for benthic HABs, and we brought in a whole bunch of experts, really great panel of folks. There's a list here for you to consult, but it was at the national level, which was pretty cool, including our experts up at Region 1, Mike and Rich. And what we were really looking at was the guidance questions of the public protection. So how we should restrict use in a water body with the presence of benthic HABs. And so we really started looking at sort of expanding, looking at how folks are evaluating their water bodies, whether they're just doing that immediate event response, whether they're doing the follow-up monitoring, or if they have the capacity to have a routine monitoring program. So as mentioned, we did a large literature review and we looked at the different indicators and metrics to start thinking about incorporating into new protocol. And then those indicators we decided to stick with are coverage, cyanobacteria, and toxin. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But we ultimately ended up kind of pursuing as more of a grab bag approach to the guidance, realizing that resources are limited. Folks might have different capacities and things of that nature. And we just really wanted to see it successfully implemented. So as I said before, we had like 3 main monitoring types that kind of fed into the decision of posting and deposting. And each one of those different types, especially based on the different indicators used, triggered different decision trees for posting and not posting. And then for the coverage, we looked at that percentage coverage. And Mike kind of did a nice primer for that, talking about their memo. That's going to be part of this whole documentation packet, where we determined what percentage covered would be most applicable for us with the given science, as well as looking at cyanobacteria presence and absence, and then looking at what cyanobacteria is present. So using microscopy or DNA, and then of course, most importantly, in most cases, if we can get that information, is knowing what toxins are being produced and at what concentration. So the reason we're giving you this update today is because we are going to be sending out all of this awesome documentation we've been putting together for the last 1.5 years plus to you all, the CCHAB community, to kind of get your impression and opinions on it. So that's going to be coming to you in early December. It's going to be, as I said, a fairly large packet, including our guidance technical report, which sort of identifies the whole process and the decision points that were made, as well as standard operating procedures for those benthic sampling collection, the corresponding field data sheet, that North Coast Regional Board thresholds memo to help define what percentage threshold we wanted to pursue for that, and then as well as the proposed signage update, and then a cool just short visual guide to help support some of our partners that'll be implementing this. So just to kind of give you the nuts and bolts of dates, we're hoping to get these documents out to you after Thanksgiving. It's going to be right in between the holiday season, so we really want you to flag this, get it on your calendars, reminders, so you know to expect it. And we're going to have around a 4-week review period. And we are kindly requesting that we can get any comments, suggestions, comments, anything by January 8th. If you have any questions, concerns, you can reach out to us. We're very accessible. We actually love to have this conversation, so definitely do. And then we'll be doing a more detailed presentation of all the pieces at the January CCHAB meeting. And that's going to really try to tie everything in and make sure that we're all in agreement. If there's any big changes we need to make, then we can address them then, because hopefully in an ideal world, we're going to try to implement this for the spring field season. So with that, I will end there.
Thank you, Carly. And now we will move on to our illness work group update. I am going to share that slide. All right. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. Just a few things as we wrap up 2024, although cases are still coming in for the team. We are uploading those case reports for those cases with HAB associated or HAB related determinations to OHABs, that's CDC's system. On that note, we also had an opportunity to provide input in a series of meetings to CDC and their team about suggestions for modifying their report forms to make it more user-friendly, but also to capture and better represent some of the details, especially for our wildlife and marine cases. Those series of discussions, along with additional ones about how we can better capture the impact of these events has been a progression and discussion, which also informed the theme of today's meeting. Thanks so much, Karen, for spearheading that effort. A couple other housekeeping things that we're looking at is galvanizing our investigatory process in a more formalized protocol. So we'll be discussing those and taking a deeper dive into refining our procedures over the winter. We're also finalizing a manuscript that will illustrate our process and highlight some of our historical cases and how those informed our decision-making process with respect to determining whether it was HAB related or not HAB related. And also just I thought it would be helpful to the team of CCHAB to better understand how we get these reports and the process of the illness work group. So case reports can come in through a variety of ways. Most of you are familiar with the primary way, which is the HAB report web portal. But we also have some pretty standard systems, including our contract with California Poison Control System. OWIHA renews that contract every 2 to 3 years. And we also include the California Department of Public Health. This allows the medical experts at the Poison Control Center to flag those cases that could be potentially harmful algal bloom related. This could be through incidental ingestion, water contact, but also through contaminated seafood, such as with domoic acid or paralytic shellfish poisoning, and a handful of other cases. In fact, we've had a few of those that have been received by the team through that portal that then we connected with our federal partners. FDA was able to then do subsequent investigations and confirm those illnesses. And those would not have been flagged for FDA had it not gone through our poison control system network as they're received by the health agencies. So this we're serving, we're providing a critical service that is sometimes not intuitive as far as how it would come to us, but nonetheless, people are getting the follow through that warrants for their cases. Other ways that we receive these reports is through CDFW mortality reports. Again, really emphasizing that we want to do our outreach to make sure that those wildlife impacts are being triaged, investigated, and assessed properly in the context of HABs. And then sometimes we get calls through the HABs hotline, as well as through public emails and calls. Then those cases are ferried out to the 3 different agencies that perform most of the investigation. We do interviews with people who have experienced potential illnesses. CDPH tends to lead those. OWIHA also assists in those efforts. OWIHA also takes lead on domestic animals, mostly dogs. Livestock, we've had a few horses. Marine mammals and birds. So that's why we're going to be following up with Justin and team after this meeting. And then of course, CDFW takes lead on fish and wildlife. Then we perform site visits and coordination if that's warranted. And of course, our water board colleagues are the primary agency that responds to the environmental data. And that could be coordinating with local water body managers, the regional water body or the regional board coordinators, and then they facilitate lab submittal of samples if that's appropriate. CDFW also does wildlife response or sample collection. And so that's been really critical because we've been able to make other case determinations that may not be HAB related, but actually get in concrete answers to certain wildlife illness events such as avian botulism and koi herpes virus disease that otherwise may not have come to light without the assistance of the HAB work group. And then, of course, other water body managers, federal agencies, local entities. And then we continue through that investigation process and it's again, a multi-agency coordination between the 4 of us. And then we conduct these interviews while laboratory analysis is pending, environmental observations, including satellite imaging. And then once we collate all of these streams of evidence, we are able to have a robust discussion in our work group meetings to assess evidence, review the interview narratives, examine the laboratory results and any site observations, and then the satellite imaging as a complementary line of evidence when it's available. And then ultimately we make a determination. Now, I know there's been some confusion in the past or curiosity about how we do this. As far as a forward-facing report, we put each case in one of 2 buckets. It's either HAB related, and then it would get reported to CDC's OHAB system, or it's not HAB related. And there's a variety of reasons why something might be not HAB related, and Karen's going to discuss this a little bit more in her presentation. But for those that get reported to CDC, because each case may have different levels of evidence to suggest our level of confidence. So there's 3 different levels, the first being suspect, which is the lowest level, and then it goes to probable and then confirmed. But as far as the way that we report those out on our website through the My Water Quality portal, our marine mammal tracking illness group, which is also on the OWIHA website, those cases, if they're reported as HAB related, meet that baseline threshold of at least suspect per the CDC definitions. And Karen will go over that in a little bit more detail. And ultimately, one click, Karen, please. All of these are brought together by the HAB-related illness tracking work group. So even though there's only, I think there's 6 of us now currently on the committee, it is a very intimate group, but it is a wonderful compilation of different subject matter experts that we bring our resources from 4 different agencies, and we're quite small, but we're quite agile. And just wanted to really extend a thank you to all of our partners, particularly the FHAB regional coordinators. You folks are doing the yeoman's work on the ground, and we could not do our efforts as efficiently as we do or as comprehensively without your efforts and the partnerships that you cultivate all year round in your regions. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it back to the chairs. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And now we're going to move on to the new subcommittee pitches, which Jamie will lead that segment.
All right. Now I'm talking. So yeah, happy to lead that. So just some quick context on what we're doing here is this is kind of a direct response to the community survey that we conducted a couple months ago. We had asked questions about interests from the community on different work groups. And so we're going to try out a new process for starting work groups. So what we have for you today right now is 3 groups or 3 brave individuals that are going to pitch groups. And what we're looking for, you don't have to make a hard commitment, is people that are interested in these groups. If we have enough interest in the meeting today, and we're also going to send out kind of a follow-up email so we can get interest kind of within the next week or so. We're looking for at least 5 people that want to be part of the work group. We'll go ahead and kind of move those forward into a more formalized work group. But we're doing it this way to kind of get community interest and get some folks that really want to participate in these groups, as opposed to the co-chairs just proposing stuff and starting stuff and then hoping that people are interested. So we have a couple of brave champions. I'll go ahead and start with Karen. So she is going to pitch a work group around fish and wildlife. So with that, I will stop talking and give her the floor to talk about her idea for this work group.
All right. Thank you so much. Can you see my slide all right?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. In case you didn't get it, I'm interested in the connection between HABs and fish and wildlife. And so that's what this group would be about. The goals there would be kind of assessing and addressing some of the impacts of HABs on fish and wildlife, but mostly I really want this to be a space for collaboration and idea sharing around this issue. I think honestly, even just getting all of the people in California interested in this issue in a room would be a huge advancement. So much less, it would be great if we could, work on projects together and kind of move some of these ideas forward. As an initial kind of product just pitch, and we could of course talk about it and see what works for the group. But a first idea would be kind of working on filling some information gaps and writing up a document about what the information gaps are in order to establish a HAB trigger level for fish and wildlife health. So as some of you guys know, there was a CCHAB trigger level document that went out around recreational levels for human and animal health, and that's now being used statewide, which is really, really awesome, and kind of shows the impact of some of these CCHAB work groups may have. So kind of applying a similar idea there of using the power of the group to do kind of a lit review and get all of our ideas together. And then hopefully that would eventually be able to be used by regulatory agencies like my own when doing project permitting and kind of give us a goal post as to where to move towards some of these levels that we're seeing. And like what is an acceptable level. And so let's just say that this would be an ongoing group until we run out of things to talk about, which I think we will have a lot to talk about. So that is my pitch. And now for ease of sharing, if it's okay, Marissa, can you go next?
Yeah, of course. Thanks. It just keeps this stuff all streamlined. So, hey folks, I'm Marissa Van Dyke. I'm just the volunteer to pitch this user group. So focused on field instruments. So think about like when you are either monitoring or now if you want to get into monitoring, what are the best received, evaluated like low cost instruments to kind of screen if you have a cyanobacteria hab or other kind of, harmful algal bloom. What are like maybe more cost intensive but deployable instruments, that kind of thing for in the field to kind of replace the frequent visits by staff, that kind of thing. So over the years, our program, FAB program, myself, many of the work groups that participated in have gotten side questions on like, well, what do you use? What's the best for this kind of instrument and that kind of thing. So this is an opportunity for us that are interested in expanding what we use in monitoring or getting started can come together in one place and start sharing information. We haven't had this opportunity before in CCHAB, though we've talked about it and in small pieces. So some of the examples would be like looking at rapid toxin testing kits, fluorometers, sondes, and deployable instruments. And we heard from many folks that filled out the larger survey that you're interested in learning more about what the better instruments are for different uses. So there seemed to be some interest in this. So we hope to hear from you all if you're interested in coming together. So mostly the goal is to share information, right? So folks are welcome to come if you haven't used them, but you're interested in using them, and also those that are using some instruments. We'll highlight pros and cons. Sometimes instruments can be loaned from manufacturers. Sometimes some of our partners already have the instruments, so maybe we can test them out, that kind of thing. So there's many different opportunities here. We would hope that we could share summaries with the larger CCHAB network, provide updates on what we've found. And another suggestion I heard from another group when they were looking at deployable instruments, particularly to measure pigments associated with cyanobacteria and other algae, that they'd like to get together and provide feedback to manufacturers of these instruments for areas of improvement, because maybe they're manufactured from a different place in the world with different sunlight intensity or different conditions, and maybe there's some tweaks that could be done to better fit for California and our weather conditions. So that's something that we've heard as well. The duration of this work group would be ongoing. We would focus on priority instruments that we determine from our user group for a set time period of 6 months to evaluate, and then we could go on and look at other instruments. So it would be ongoing, but we would parse out what instruments we're looking at for a piece of time, and that's the proposal.
Awesome.
Turn it back to you.
Right. So we have one more pitch from Mike Thomas. So Mike, if you want to take the floor. And then I'll also mention for those that have pitched, there's a couple questions for y'all in the chat if you want to kind of address those.
Hey, great. Thanks, Jamie. I'm going to zoom through these slides real quick. So the pitch that I'm presenting is for drones and aerial monitoring. So basically what this subcommittee group would do is investigate drones and other forms of aerial technologies for monitoring FABs, not only in lakes, but also in rivers. Duration for this, I think, would just be a few months. So some tasks that the subcommittee would do would be review existing research for looking at planktonic blooms in lakes and reservoirs, but also look at some emerging research that's coming out about looking at benthics in rivers, most notably in New Zealand. So basically determine if this is feasible, and if so, can these drones estimate certain metrics like percent cover of benthic cyanobacteria, which I'm interested in, and then evaluate if this would increase our ability to identify, monitor, and communicate public health risks in California. The reason I guess I'm interested in this, I wanted to share really quick. We were able to do a helicopter flight in September 2023, both over the South Fork Eel River and various lakes in the North Coast region. We were able to visually and readily observe microcoleus and riffle habitat of rivers, and I'll show you a picture here in a second. Other benthic cyanobacteria was not as easily distinguishable, and sometimes in lakes and reservoirs, it was difficult to determine if it was a bloom or turbid water. But using this technology, these observations in conjunction with like field sampling, I think this would really help explain distribution and spatial extent of blooms in our water bodies. So quickly, if you look at this picture here, you can see those dark patches in this riffle of the South Fork Eel River. Those have been field confirmed as microcoleus mats. So very easily, there's a little bit of glare on the water here, but very easily observed from the helicopter flight. And this is just showing a extended picture of that reach. In the blue circle up there, you can see, again, there's a little bit of water or glare there, but that's where the dark microcoleus mats are in the riffle habitat. And that black circle here, this was also field confirmed to be highly toxic benthic cyanobacteria, but it kind of shows up with just this little brown smudge on the picture. You could see in the red where it is devoid of growth. And then you can also see some filamentous green algae too. And just switching over to lakes and reservoirs, we flew over Lake Pillsbury. We could very easily see a field confirmed planktonic bloom accumulating along the shoreline in that left picture. Also could easily see some aquatic plants. But in other parts of the water body, as shown in that picture on the right, it was unclear whether that was cyanobacteria or just turbid water. So I think there's a lot of potential in drones, and it's, besides being really cool, I think it is the way of the future. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike. Okay, so we're running a little short on time. So I think the way we'd want to do this is go ahead and if you have questions for folks in the that have pitched, please put them in the chat and they can address them during our break, which is going to be truncated because we also want to give Hugh a moment. He let me know he had an update for the mitigation work group. And then if you are interested in the one of the groups, please go ahead and put your name, your email address, and then which group or groups you would be interested in. We're looking for 5 people to be interested in it in order to kind of move the concept forward. Just consider this a soft commitment, like, oh, I probably would be interested, or I might want to participate, or I'd be interested to see those types of those outputs at this point. So you're not like, signing a contract in blood or anything, but we just want to see just general interest of people on the phone for these different groups. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Hugh to give his update on mitigation, and then we can kind of, the pitching groups can kind of keep an eye on the chat during his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Hugh Dalton, chairperson of the Mitigation Subcommittee. As many of you have reported today, 2024 was a very active bloom year for both cyanobacteria and aquatic plant growth. Many California lakes made the news for HABs, elevated cyanotoxins, low dissolved oxygen concentrations, fish kills, and lake closures. The mitigation subcommittee discussion topics this year included those lakes frequently posting danger status on the HAB portal, cyanobacteria and aquatic weed control updates, water quality monitoring and results, and old and new mitigation options. This year, I focused the majority of my volunteer efforts at Pinto Lake in Watsonville, which is very close to where I live. I assisted with their biweekly lake surveillance, water quality monitoring, and documenting 3 distinct but nearly continuous cyanobacteria blooms starting in late January and currently persisting into mid-November. Pinto Lake's first bloom was primarily a Phamazomenon. The second one was Anabina, and the third one now is Microcystis, following an early lake turnover event due to anoxia in the hypolimnium in early October. Elevated cyanotoxins were persistent in late summer until this week. Pinto Lake is currently closed to public recreation. Also this year, Bill Taylor and I met with East Bay Parks District staff in the Oakland Hills for a site visit at Lake Temescal and Lake Anza on August 1st. And as Hal McLean reported, both of these lakes had prolonged HABs and elevated cyanotoxins that caused extended lake closures to swimming recreation. Lastly, Gur Chand, a water resources control engineer from the MPDS wastewater unit and Division of Water Quality, in charge of aquatic pesticide application plans and permitting. Gur and his fellow staff reached out to our subcommittee in September and October to discuss novel mitigation techniques with them, and also requested our review of their draft revised APAP permit due out in early 2025, specifically asking for our committee's input on mitigation options. Gur informed us about their consolidation plan to combine 4 separate permits into one MPDS APAP plan to include 1. Permitting and reporting of aquatic pesticides and herbicides, 2. Agricultural spraying, 3. Vector control, and 4. Invasive species control. And that is all I have for today. Does anyone have any questions for me?
All right, thanks so much, Hugh. Feel free to message Hugh too. We're gonna jump into break now. So I want everyone to have time to do their bio breaks and go get a drink of water. So we're gonna push everything back just by 5 minutes. So we'll be back at 11:05 for our next presentation. Okay, can people see my screen all right?
Looks good.
Okay, awesome, thank you. All right, so I will be giving the next presentation. Hi everyone, I'm Karen Odkins, and I'm the Freshwater and Estuarine Harmful Algae Bloom Coordinator over at CDFW. So today I'm just going to give you a little bit of an update on some of the incident response cases that happened this year, and also some of the exciting program highlights that are going on over at CDFW as of late. So first, we got to do a little bit of context for those of you who haven't heard it yet. Sorry if this is repetitive for some folks. Feel free to tune out and tune back in if needed. And then I'm going to talk about 2024's kind of our preliminary fish and wildlife summer incident kind of summary. And I will also talk about some of those programmatic highlights I was talking about. Background. Starting way general out here. So Assembly Bill 834 passed in 2019, which formally started the FHAB program. There was an informal version at water boards before that, but our group does 4 main things. We do kind of coordinate the immediate and long-term event response and also communicate those risks that are associated with that. We do monitoring and assessment to track kind of the status and the trends and help identify at-risk water bodies within the state. And we also do applied research and tool development. And finally, We do some outreach and education. We have the website and do the data management over within that program. And as you can see, this is an interagency effort. So you've kind of seen similar things before. Marissa, I think, showed a version of this map. So we have FHAB coordinators over at water boards all over the state, and also so regionally and at state board. And then it's me over at CDFW. And let's talk about some incident response context too. So if you haven't gotten the picture from other presentations yet, basically, there is a harmful algae bloom-related illness investigation work group in California when there are HABs that interact with fish and wildlife, domestic animals, or humans, and they are exposed. Sometimes they become ill or die, and that's when this work group comes in, and we actually do an investigation to see if that was HAB-related or not. And the information from these investigations are hopefully used to help prevent future cases. We've definitely, a lot of the information gets sent over to the CDC, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And they work on kind of analyses that help identify what those cases may look like on a larger scale, and we get more information from those large numbers of cases when they're all put together and analyzed. So hopefully that helps prevent future cases in that way. So a little bit about how we work with you all and how this information is triaged. So as you heard earlier, it comes from a couple of different sources, from web forms, from emails, from poison control, and it all goes into the FHAB database. From there, it is either sent over to the illness work group, where we would do that whole process that I just talked about a little bit. And then it also gets posted on a web portal after it has been triaged by the folks over at Waterboard who are looking at all of the incoming cases. And so that's how we kind of report out to folks in the public that these cases are occurring, and in the form of this kind of safety tool. You have already seen this diagram in a circular form from Shannon, so I won't belabor the point, but as you can see, we have a pretty laid out process for the illness investigation work group, and we work together on that process to get it all the way from the report over to OHAB's reporting. This process can take a long time or a little amount of time. It depends on if that information is reported quickly, how quick we are able to get out to the sampling site, how quick we are able to get in touch with the people who are reporting, or land managers, and lab samples. So there's a lot of different things that kind of determine how long these cases take to resolve. And we want to make sure that we get all the information we possibly can on a case before we go into that phase where we're really analyzing, because we want to do a good job. So that's why sometimes these cases can take quite a while. So the case determinations kind of fall into two main groups, and there are some subgroups which I will talk about in a minute, but the two kind of main groups are they're either HAB related or considered to be HAB related to some extent, or not HAB related. So for it to be determined to be HAB related, it's got to have sufficient information on the illness and the symptomatic individual, and those symptoms that the person or the animal has to be consistent with HAB exposure, and what those kind of symptoms look like. And then it also, on the environmental side, has to have sufficient environmental evidence showing that there was a HAB there, and environmental evidence has to be consistent with HAB exposure. So it has to have kind of both sides of that. On the not HAB related side of things, the most common reason that we have things that are not HAB related is we just don't have enough information. Maybe we get a report, but we weren't able to follow up with that person, and so we don't actually have enough information on where it was or what happened to really be able to follow up. Or maybe we just kind of missed the time frame, and we weren't able to get folks out quick enough. or, there's lots of reasons that, or, maybe the situation itself was such that we just don't know. Lots of confounding variables a lot of times. So that is the most frequent. We also have times when the symptoms that we see are not consistent with HAB exposure. Maybe it turns out to be a communicable disease or something like that. And then, yeah, sometimes there is a different illness that was identified. I think Shannon listed a couple cases of Fish and Wildlife that happened. So that is also satisfying when we are able to identify that there is something else going on and specifically pinpoint that. So those cases get followed up, all cases. We coordinate with appropriate signage with the water boards for posting HAB-related signage to reduce exposure to humans as much as we can. And then we also notify all other appropriate parties of our case determinations. And in the cases where there is a HAB-related case, we report it to OHABs, which I will describe what that is in a bit. And that's only when it is HAB-related that it gets reported onto the CDC's OHABs database. So what is that database? So CDC's One Health Harmful Algal Bloom System, or OHABs, is a voluntary reporting system, and it tracks individual cases that are, deal with exposure to HABs. They've been collecting since 2016. In the past, they have had up to 16 states report, but in 2022, they only had 15. And so that was a lower number. So it would be cool if more people could report. If you have friends in other states, tell them to report. OHABs is really awesome because it does use that One Health approach, which means that they're collecting a lot of different types of data and using all of that data together to kind of learn more about each of these individual sectors. So it collects human data, domestic animal data, wildlife data, and also environmental data. So the CDC takes all that data and they do some analyses and they write these annual summary reports that are available to the public. And they just came out with their 2022 one. Very interesting, worth a read if you have not yet. You will see in this little red box on my slide that California got a shout out in maybe a bad way, where our 2022 big Bay Area bloom was a huge, massive fish and wildlife kill. And so that would specifically shout out in their summary key points. So I think this is where the new start stuff maybe comes up. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of these animal cases. So, we do report these onto the CDC, but rather than just saying, this is HAB related, the way that it's actually reported is in 3 different case definitions. And so this is what it looks like for animals in particular. It is either suspect, which is the lowest threshold for evidence, probable, or confirmed, which is the highest threshold for evidence. And in this chart below, you can see that these different determinations require really specific threshold and criteria be met of the type of evidence that we are using, but it is still quite flexible. So you can see that for suspect, all you need is exposure to the HAB, signs that are consistent with a HAB, and then that public health assessment. So it's not a huge burden of evidence in order to have that meet that criteria. And then all the way up at confirmed, of course, it takes a lot more information in order to submit it under that kind of threshold. Now, these fish and wildlife cases can be especially difficult. So first of all, we often have limited information, right? They're fish and wildlife. They can't talk to us and say what hurts. And of course, these are often remote places. And so, that's kind of, and we often also get kind of brought in after there's been a massive kill already. So that's kind of where we're starting off here. Also, HABs are often kind of a chronic exposure in these cases. So, maybe they've been living in kind of a HAB soup for a while. And so that's a little bit harder to assess as opposed to many of these acute cases that are usually the exposures we see for humans or dogs. So it's a little bit of a different beast in that way as well. Also, these lakes and rivers are often have many stressors in those systems. So I kind of put a couple of those in the slides that are kind of small here, but you can see a lot of these places are already have, anoxic depths. and maybe there's some mixing events, and maybe it's really hot already. And so in a lot of these cases, we do have those different stressors that are occurring all at the same time. And so these case definitions become really important. And we have been interpreting them as if there is a HAB in this area, and we think that the HAB may have pushed the animal over the edge and caused them harm, even if there are also other stressors, then we are still going to be counting it as HAB related in this case. So hopefully that gives you some context for how we're making some of these decisions. Okay, so now let's jump into some data. So this is kind of still developing data, but you can see here in this table, these are HAB incident reports that we've received, and then the last column is illnesses. So by year here, and you can see 2024, we only have as of August 1st in this table. Of course, we will continue to update this, and we'll be closing out our 2024 cases, you know, at the end of the year. And so stay tuned for that. But you can see in the second column, these are the incident reports that we received. These are all of our reports. So that includes, you know, just people who saw a HAB or think they saw a HAB. And so you can see those are in the hundreds per year on average. And it's generally increasing. And then this last column is the incidents that have to do with some sort of illness. So these are not incidents that have been determined to be HAB related, just reports that have illnesses associated with them. So that's about 14% of the reports that we get have those illnesses associated with them that need to be investigated to see if they are HAB related or not. Okay, and now let's jump into some fish and wildlife numbers. So this is specifically freshwater and estuary illnesses that were reported, not the marine ones that we were hearing about earlier. And I will also qualify this that these are only the quantified mortalities that are plotted today, and some of them are not. So we will get reports that are just, you know, we don't get estimates of the numbers, or it's a picture and there's only a couple of fish, but we heard that there were many more. So we're not able to quantify the number in that case, so that cannot be plotted in this way, unfortunately. But starting on the left here, we have numbers of animals that are affected. As you can see, birds and turtles are, if that's the reptile in orange there, that are generally the ones that are being affected and are shown to be HAB related. So these are all HAB related now. Over in the freshwater and estuary kind of realm of things, other than the fish, which I have pulled out into another graph on the right. But so these cases are notable in that there aren't very many. So it's really hard to show that these are HAB related. And also, this is really interesting because if you just were watching that marine presentation, obviously they have a ton of mammals, and that's mostly what they're dealing with. And so that's just a really different story than what they're seeing over in the marine side of things. Now, if we look at the fish, so we've had 36 freshwater HAB-related fish cases that were reported, and you can see what the plot normally looks like is that tiny little box in the upper right-hand corner here. That is really hard to look at because the 2022 San Francisco Bay Area case right now just dwarfs everything else. And that won't be true in the coming years because 2024 have had some big cases, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I pulled those out so that we could see something, and we can see that there's generally an increase over time a little bit. You know, we're still have not that many years of data, so no statistics yet, but hopefully as time goes on, we'll be able to learn more from these numbers. I do want to point out that, of course, some cases are more impactful than others, not only with numbers, but also when we're talking about these fish and wildlife populations. Of course, some of these are, you know, threatened species, and you know, are listed. So we want to be especially cognizant of that. For example, in 2022, that huge fish kill that did happen in the bay that also affected green sturgeon, which are federally threatened, and then also white sturgeon, which primarily or partly at least because of this fish kill were now are under consideration under California for listing. Okay, So let's talk about some notable 2024 HAB-related fish kills now that we have a little summary and have some context of where we're coming from in the past. So Lake San Antonio was one of the big fish kills that we had this year. So the lake is that little red dot on the map there. If you aren't familiar, it's in the county of Monterey, and it's owned and operated by them as well. It's a pretty big reservoir, and it is used for storage and recreation and whatnot. So CDFW began stocking triploid rainbow trout in December of 2023 here. So we had some extra interest in this lake for that reason. And it does have reoccurring HABs there. As you can see, so this is a cyano index. This is from our satellite tool. When there is a kind of lump here, that is showing that there is a HAB that's occurring in this from a satellite kind of perspective here. And you can see that there have been multiple HABs over time. So Lake San Antonio had a bloom that was reported to CDFW on July 4th of July. And that was when the first, couple of fish were starting to be noted. So we went out, or our staff over at our region went out and monitored for water temperature, which was warm, DO, which was, in some places low, but not crazy low, and pH, which was high, but not crazy high. And they also got samples, HAB samples on July 12th. And so you could see here that they did find some cyanobacteria and also some toxins in low amounts, but they weren't anything to write home about. There weren't super large amounts of either. So what was interesting though, if you looked at the satellite map, is that, so this red box, the first red boxes that you can see on this satellite cyano index map was when that fish kill was first reported. And then you can see the second red box was when we got out there and actually collected the sample. So it looks like there was kind of a crash as this was occurring. And when the majority of the fish were dying, there was sort of a crash going on, and we just missed it, unfortunately. So this is an example of how hard it is to do these investigations sometimes. So in response, CDFW staff over at Region 4, and they were awesome to work with, so shout out to them. They went out and they went to 9 sites over 2 days, and they surveyed around the lake, 1.4 miles of the shoreline, out of about 60, so it's not a ton, but it was a ton of work for them. As you'll see, they surveyed 4,511 individuals, and for each of those fish, they counted them and got their species and length. And, that was a huge effort. Using that data, we were able to do some extrapolations around the lake, also based on densities, so it wasn't just like a straight extrapolation. It was a little more complicated than that, but we were able to do some analyses. And of course, there's also a caveat that we did not count the fish in the middle of the lake, there were dead fish there too. So this is maybe an underestimate in that way. They also were able to look at some of the conditions of the fish. And so you can see here in this first picture that the gills here of the fish, which should be kind of a deep red, are kind of a deep red, and then they turn into this kind of a light and rough texture. So that is unusual, and that light color is kind of symptomatic potentially of low dissolved oxygen at some point. Now, moving down to the data that you see here, we have species. And so what I really want to highlight here is, first of all, the total number is enormous. 2,000 or 200,000 plus fish died, or are estimated to have died from this event. And again, I think this may be an underestimate of what we're seeing. And then the majority here were threadfin shad that were affected. All right, moving on to the next case. East Walker River. So this was kind of an interesting case. So just to kind of set up the location here, you can see Bridgeport Reservoir, and then that flows into the East Walker River. The East Walker River in that area is actually CDFW property. It is our East Walker River wildlife area. It's a popular area for fishing and recreation. And so there was an anoxic water release from Bridgeport Reservoir into the East Walker River. And there had been a known HAB at Bridgeport Reservoir, which did have, a Famazomenon and Microcystis present, and also had some low-level toxins or mid-level toxins there. And so another thing that was part of this evidence here that was kind of interesting is that locals had observed what they were calling an electric green slug of water that was going down the river at the time that the fish kills were occurring. So that was sort of an interesting part of this. So CDFW staff went out and surveyed in that area from Bridgeport all the way to the Nevada border. And they were able to collect water quality data and also do, similar to the last case, an inventory of the fish carcasses. So this case killed about 48,000 fish. In this case, it was mostly Sacramento perch and brown trout. This is an issue that is known and repeated and in this area. So CDFW staff over at the lands there are working to try to improve the water quality of future releases in collaboration with other entities in that area. Some other significant cases, unfortunately, I don't have time to talk about each one. Of course, every case is kind of its own atrocity in its own way, but we don't have time to talk about all of them today. But I will share that Lake Gregory did have a large bloom as well, with about 1,400 fish, mostly catfish and tule perch. Interestingly, and sort of on a different note, Discovery Bay had a bunch of fish kills, 5 fish kills, individual fish kills that were reported this summer. They were all pretty small, but this is kind of interesting because it was over a longer period of time and kind of a prolonged situation. We do have 8 cases that are still under investigation as of now. More could come in by the end of the year as well. So that's something to keep aware of. But most of these are Clear Lake cases that we're still working on, just trying to do a really thorough job on those. And also, I think Sabrina had mentioned that we also have a mammal case, and then the rest are fish cases. And so the main point perhaps is if you see a fish or wildlife potentially related HAB illness issue, please report it. You can report it through our normal Bloom report system. And, we really can't know about these unless you all are reporting. So please be sure to if that information comes your way. All right, some other less hopefully sad developments. So first of all, the Bay Area, as many of you know, have had some huge blooms in the past, and so we are all trying to get prepared for that. Region 2 has been doing some awesome coordination work, which I'll talk about in a second, and then also, NOAA MERHAB is going on, and so there's a lot of really cool efforts that are going on to do that. So I'm going to talk about just a really small portion of that. That's, in my small world of what I'm doing. So first of all, like I said, Region 2 has been putting together this awesome collaboration that we've been a part of. So this is an interagency kind of Bay Area HAB response group. And so we're working on notifying each other of bloom observations and also bloom IDs that come up. We also have agreed on and kind of written out a coordinated HAB response plan now, which is really cool and a big improvement as to clarifying who's doing what in the region in case of a big HAB. Now, in terms of what CDFW by ourselves are doing, so I am in charge of leading the fish kill response efforts if another bloom comes up. So that will include leading community science response. And so that means project management for fish kill tracking through the iNaturalist application like we have in the past. And many of you have probably seen the results of those. And of course, collecting and compiling all the data from all of the sources. So that would be iNaturalist, emails, hotlines, all the things that, and kind of cross-referencing those so we're not double counting individuals. In addition to that, we will also be doing our own response. So that would be folks going out through boat and shore-based surveys in the field. And so I will be doing the organizing in advance for the supplies there. And then I've also written up this year some SOPs and been distributing those so that folks are ready to go. And also, we unfortunately are really short-staffed right now in our region. So we now have a large field team of folks who are potentially available at the time. And so we are hoping that by having a really, really large group of people who might be available, some people will be available when the HAB comes. This is one of the challenges of these incidents. We don't know when they're coming. And so they would be able to mobilize and get in the field and respond to those events at the time. In addition to that, with sturgeon becoming a really big issue at CDFW and in the state, we are coordinating a little bit of extra sturgeon sampling. So in the past, we have done some of this, but it will be a little bit more of a coordinated effort here. So sturgeon in the field will be tagged, and then samples will be collected and distributed to labs for genetic work. So one of the problems that we've had in the past is that some of the carcasses were so kind of decomposed that we were not able to tell what kind of fish they were. So that's where that DNA work will be really helpful. And then, for some other research reasons as well. So in addition to that, coordinating necropsies with our wildlife health lab as needed, and also obviously I am the lead for the interagency HAB-related illness work group for fish and wildlife cases. So that would be kind of my role, in addition to helping provide communication and PR as needed for these kinds of cases as they relate to fish and wildlife. And finally, managing lab contracts for toxins and tissue and water. Okay, moving on. So there has been some extra or new monitoring on CDFW lands, which I'm really excited about. I think that, CDFW, we own lands, and so we should be responsible stewards of those lands and try to help protect folks. So I'm trying to expand that monitoring. Sabrina over at Region 6 has been super awesome, and they have already organized some monitoring at our CDFW land, so we were able to help with that financially, but she did all of the organization work. So thank you, Sabrina, for that at Red Lake and Heenan Lake. And then in addition to that, we got a couple new folks who are starting to do some monitoring. So CDFW Salton Sea program is now kind of collecting some samples as needed. North Table Mountain Ecological Reserve, which is that really pretty picture there. Some of you, if you're in the Sacramento area, maybe love this place like I do. They have a lot of recreators in the summer when it gets hot and dry and not quite as lush looking as that picture. And they have exposure, a lot of dogs and stuff. So they are going to start monitoring routinely. I went and did a training with them. And then San Joaquinto Wildlife Area, which has Mystic Lake, will also be doing routine monitoring. And finally, I'm really excited about this Fishing in the City Sacramento pilot partnership. So CDFW has this Fishing in the City program, if you've never heard of it. Basically, they stock fish in urban and suburban ponds around California in a lot of different places. And they teach in-person learn to fish clinics for all ages. And you can just show up to one of these clinics and they'll lend you a fishing rod, and they teach you how to do it, which is really cool. So we stock 7 Sacramento area ponds with trout. A bunch of those have had HABs in them, and 3 of them had fish kills recently. So that's not great since we're stocking these fish. So how can we prevent that? So CDFW staff and our partners over at Hooked on Fishing Not Violence, which is a nonprofit that's local to Sacramento, are going to start monitoring some of these stocked ponds before they're stocked and also before these clinics. And so this is a new monitoring partnership that will hopefully, like I said, help prevent some of these stockings occurring in poor water quality areas, and also help prevent human exposure to HABs during these fishing clinics. And finally, it will give folks a chance to learn a little bit more about water quality, which is always a good thing. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. I think that we need to move on to our next one. So please hold questions, and or you can drop them in the chat if you'd like, or you can always email me too. Let's move on to our next presentation, and then if we have time at the end, I'm happy to stay a little later too and answer questions if needed. So next we have Amy Krasner. She is with the Florida Institute of Technology, and I'm so excited that she's here. We heard about her presentation over at the US HAB Symposium in Maine, and we are so delighted to have you, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Should I share my screen? Is that the best?
Yeah, if that's possible. Otherwise, I can throw your slides up there too, if you prefer.
Let's see here. Does everyone see the...
I see. Oh yeah, there we go.
Okay, and are we moving?
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yep,
Okay.
that looks great.
Cool. All right. Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Amy Krasner, and I'm a veterinarian and PhD student at Florida Institute of Technology. And my advisor is Dr. Spencer Fire. We're located in Melbourne, Florida. And I'd like to thank collaborators from Harbor Branch Oceanographic, Hub SeaWorld Research Institute, and the Florida Otter Spotter Program, as well as funding sources, the National Defense Science and Engineering Graduate Fellowship Program and the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program for supporting this research that I want to talk about today, which is titled Microcystin Exposure and Liver Lesions in Estuarine Sentinels in the Indian River Lagoon, Florida. So, as we all know, microcystin is a biotoxin produced by blue-green algae. It's primarily found in freshwater, but also found in brackish and saltwater, and it can cause liver damage and tumor promotion in humans and animals. The Indian River Lagoon is a diverse estuary on the east coast of central Florida with over 4,000 species of flora and fauna, and it's considered an estuary of national significance. It's experiencing declining water quality in conjunction with increased vulnerability to harmful algal blooms, unfortunately. And microcystin was first introduced via freshwater outflows from the largest freshwater lake in Florida, Lake Okeechobee, to the southern Indian River Lagoon in 2005. So what do we know about microcystin exposure to IRL inhabitants? Well, microcystin has been detected in water samples intermittently since 2005, with the highest levels measured in the southern Indian River Lagoon, but it has been found throughout the lagoon. Potential public health impacts include an increased incidence of non-alcoholic liver disease and microcystin detection in human nasal swabs. It's caused pet dog illness and deaths, and it's been detected in putatively healthy bull sharks and green sea turtles. However, there's a few missing pieces. Routine or pre-mortem microcystin monitoring is not always performed or typically performed in humans and marine wildlife. Confirmatory testing is not always performed, and health impact screening is not typically performed. So we use, to address these data gaps, we use two sentinel species, bottlenose dolphins and North American river otters. We use samples collected between 2005 and 2024. Hub SeaWorld Research Institute provided dolphin samples from the Northern IRL, and Harbor Branch Oceanographic collected dolphin samples from the Southern IRL, and the Florida Otter Spotter Program collected otter samples. For microcystin exposure detection, we looked at post-mortem liver, feces, and/or respiratory swabs, as well as pre-mortem blow that we collected, extracted, and then screened with a microcystins nodularin at ELISA. For the blow, that was on stranded dolphins only in the northern half of the Indian River Lagoon, and 3 exhales per animal were collected into a sterile petri dish for that. And then confirmatory testing via liquid chromatography tandem mass spec, total microcystin and nods was using the MMP method was performed on ELISA positive samples, as well as those with liver lesions that could be consistent with microcystin exposure. For disease linked to microcystin exposure, liver histopathology reports were reviewed for lesions including necrosis, hepatocellular carcinoma, lipidosis, which is fatty liver, fibrosis or scarring, hemorrhage, and or inflammation. So for we also performed spike recoveries on respiratory swabs and blow plates using standard 0 through 5, a sample blank, and the control that came with the ELISA kit. For the extraction protocol for the blow plates or the petri dish plates, the Dishes were washed with 10 mils of 100% ethanol. They were placed on a plate shaker for 1 hour. They were dried under compressed air at 37 degrees Celsius for 24 hours in a 20 ml glass tube. And then it was resuspended with 500 microliters of microcystin diluent buffer that came with the ELISA kit. And then for the respiratory swabs, they were brought to room temperature and then vortex with 500 microliters of the microcystin diluent buffer for 10 minutes. So for microcystin detection, a total of 193 animals were screened for microcystin. 92% were recovered from the northern Indian River Lagoon. 156 of those were dolphins, and 6% of those were ELISA positive. Microcystin was detected between 2.3 and 34.2 nanograms per gram, and the method detection limit varied for each of the ELISA tests, but it was between 0.94 and 7.73 nanograms per gram. Those ELISA positive samples were from the northern IRL only. Microcystin was detected via ELISA across season, year, age class, and sex. 80% of those samples were from the liver and 20% were feces. No swabs or blow plates were positive. However, these were not confirmed. None of these were confirmed by MMPB, and the detection limit for MMPB was 10 nanograms per gram. For otters, we looked at screen 37 for microcystin, and microcystin was not detected via ELISA or MMPB in any individual. For the liver lesions, 50% of dolphins and 18% of otters with available histopathology had liver lesions potentially consistent with microcystin exposure. And in dolphins, that included inflammation, fibrosis, lipidosis, necrosis, and hemorrhage. And in otters, that included inflammation and necrosis. And you can see inflammation here, kind of looks like that pale liver, and necrosis kind of just looks like an angry liver. You can see here on the right. Inflammation was the most common lesion in both species. 20% of dolphins that were microcystin positive on ELISA also had lipidosis. Primary liver dysfunction caused dolphin mortality in 3% of cases, whereas liver dysfunction was suspected in 5% of otters. For the spike recoveries and for the blow plates, concentrations of 0.15 to 1 nanogram of microcystin per ml extract led to recovery ranging from 57.5 to 140%. Concentrations between 0.03 to 0.2 nanogram microcystin per ml extract had 0% recovery. And then 0.2 nanograms microcystin per ml extract was detected in the sample blank. For the swabs, concentrations between 0.03 and 1 nanogram microcystin per ml extract led to recovery values ranging from 120 to 833%. And 1 nanogram microcystin per ml extract, that sample had 120% recovery, which is at the upper end of the acceptable range, which is 80 to 120%. And then 0.18 nanogram microcystin per ml extracts were detected both in the sample blank and standard 0. And this is similar to what's been detected in the sample blanks in human nasal swab studies. So after accounting for the levels in the sample blank standard 0, concentrations between 0.2 and 1 nanogram microcystin per ml extract led to recovery values ranging from 87.5 to 102%. So this was the first survey for a HAB toxin in IRL river otters and for microcystin in IRL dolphins. ELISA positive samples may need another method of confirmation because the MMPB had a higher detection limit than ELISA, or they may represent false positives. Respiratory swabs could be a suitable microcystin screening tool in free-ranging dolphins, but further validation is required. However, the liver lesions were not linked to microcystin exposure, and other causes like infectious agents, heavy metals, metabolic and nutritional disorders should be considered. And continued microcystin screening is recommended in IRL dolphins and river otters, especially during blooms or when suggestive liver lesions are present. So some future HAB toxin screening goals for the region that we're hoping to work on are validating below and blubber for analysis of 14 different HAB toxins, pairing those with liver and kidney samples in IRL dolphins, and health assessments of Lake Okeechobee and Indian River Lagoon river otters, including HAB toxin analysis. And just a plug, if you're ever interested in hearing about it, my dissertation work is regarding domoic acid induced kidney lesions in free-ranging California sea lions. And hopefully I'll be finishing up with that by next summer. And here's just, we're still working on getting the dolphin paper published, but here is the otter paper. If you're interested in getting more information, of course, you're also welcome to ask any questions. And if you have any questions or comments or any jobs, since I'll be graduating next summer, ideas or collaborations would be great. And I appreciate the invitation to talk here, and thank you for your attention.
Awesome presentation. Thank you so much. I love the awesome. Yeah, does anyone have questions? Let me check the chat here. I have a question while we're waiting for people to formulate theirs. This might be a silly question here, but can you treat these animals for these liver lesions? Is there kind of a protocol for that?
There's not. So the animals, some dolphins can, in the Indian River Lagoon, can go into rehab. And so in theory, they could be treated for liver lesions, but they're usually found, these were, all found post-mortem. So
yeah, sure.
So it's unlikely that any of these dolphins were treated for those, and they're not always clinically causing an apparent clinical problem. Sometimes they were, like some of those animals, had liver failure, but I don't believe any of those that had liver failure were, for the dolphins anyway, were in rehabilitation beforehand. I think they were found deceased, unfortunately, but in theory, attempts at treatment could be made. The otters, they were all road victims. So with the exception of, I believe, one or two, so they did not have any opportunity for treatment either.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like a high percentage of these animals are having this issue. So if they're already, in treatment for other things, maybe that would be.
Yeah, a lot of them do have some kind of liver lesions, and those could be, some of the liver lesions could be metabolic, like lipidosis is sometimes thought to be metabolic related. They see that in other, captive or dolphins under human managed care. And so that could be some endocrine relation, but we don't know what the primary cause is for the ones here. Yeah. And then some of the, like fibrosis, for example, could be from previous parasites. Heavy metals are also a concern in this area. There wasn't really any much overlap with any of these animals and heavy metal testing, but previous studies have been performed with heavy metals in Indian River Lagoon dolphins. And they're included actually in the river otter paper. We did look at some heavy metals, but we couldn't say for sure that they were causing liver lesions. At least for the otters, the heavy metals were found at background level. Well, we presume to be background levels. Interestingly, there's a higher than expected copper value, but otherwise that was still considered background probably.
Okay. Interesting. Any other questions? All right. Well, feel free to, if you don't want to ask in front of the whole group, we can stay on too. But thank you all so much for coming. And that is the end of our agenda for today.
Yeah, we got in the chat actually.
Oh, can you read it?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. So Christine just asked, dolphins are fish eaters. So is there an idea of where the microcystins are coming from in their food sources?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, there's nothing. We don't have any good data about microcystin in fish in the lagoon yet. There's, I think, been some preliminary looks, but nothing published. So, but yeah, it's possible that it's coming from the fish. There actually was just a paper that came out on diets of river otters in the area, but I didn't have that information prior to this study, and it didn't look at microcystin exposure in those either. So we do know what IRL dolphins consume, but we don't know the microcystin loads or the potential loads in them. Striped mullet were found, I believe, in either the green sea turtles or the bull shark stomachs at higher levels than other prey, and they were hypothesized as a possible microcystin vector, but no study I'm aware of has looked at that, but it would be a good thing to do for sure. Good question.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you sharing your work, and I'm sure a lot of us will be reading that otter paper. And yeah, so like I said, if folks want to keep an eye on their email, that would be great. We will be sending around a survey as well. If folks are still thinking about which of the subcommittees they might be interested in, that would be another opportunity to sign up for them. And otherwise, we'll see you at our next meeting, which is, Jamie, do you happen to know, January?
End of January.
End of January. Yep.
Great.
You'll get emails. All right, everybody. Thanks so much and have a good rest of your day.